It's funny because you can always tell the people who don't actually know like the poker world, because if people were fans of StarCraft, when they used to hear these stories of like the really good players switching over and becoming poker pros, they would always be like, oh, that sucks. Why did they do that? Like, why didn't they stay playing StarCraft? It's like, if you actually think about it, there's a very logical way to explain it, which is you don't, in StarCraft, like you say, you have to basically be top 10, and let's be real, probably top 5 if you want to make good money, and you have to practice all day to be top 50. Whereas in poker, I mean, everyone knows you have to be the best just at a table, at any level. You can make lots of money. You can set your own hours. It's got like a lot of the appeals of StarCraft, right? But without a lot of the downside of StarCraft.
Yeah, of course. And also like I really loved Korea, and I think it was a wonderful place and a wonderful experience. But you pretty much had to move to Korea to be a StarCraft professional back in the day. I can see that it doesn't fit for a lot of players that don't necessarily want to start a new life and to leave their family and everything behind and move to Korea. It's pretty hard. Whereas like poker, you could just play online and be a professional. Like the amount of freedom it gave, it was the amount of freedom and the skill set that you can use from being a good StarCraft player to a good poker player is just basically like. Because now, like actually now, Yellow and Boxer, they both also are poker players.
Right. That was actually one thing I was going to ask you about, because another thing that people probably won't know, because it's quite an obscure detail, is that in Korea, it's not really sort of like legal to gamble if you're Koreans in casinos. If you go there, it's always like foreigners and Westerners, right? Is it actually illegal?
Yeah, it's really weird. So there are casinos actually in Korea, and if you don't have a Korean passport, you can go freely. But when you get in, then you check your ID. If you're Asian, then check your ID, and then if you have a Korean passport, you're not allowed. So if you Korean with an American passport, you're allowed to play in the casino. But if you're Korean with a Korean passport, you cannot get in the casino and gamble, which is like it's really weird. I guess they're trying to protect the Korean because they really love to gamble.
Sure.
But online obviously it's a little bit it's quite a gray area. I think it's not either.
You can get around it.
There's no real law around it, I think.
Because that was the thing that's sort of funny, is that obviously at the time when you guys switched over and became successful in poker, you might think, why don't the Koreans just do it? But as we're saying here, like it wasn't really something that they thought of, right? They just kind of was stuck in the world of I'm just playing StarCraft.
Yeah, it was difficult. It was like it's a current. I mean, like the game in the casino, they were not that big because we were playing mostly online, and they're not that big also, of course, because the Koreans can play. So the casinos in Korea, they're mostly all the customers are tourists or like Korean Americans. But I think Koreans they didn't move into poker like much later. I think most of them, yeah.
Right. One little detail.
Some of them did the switch. I think I don't know if you know this player Kim Gabyong, Love Dome.
What was he called in the game?
His StarCraft ID was Love Dome.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that player, no.
And actually, he made the switch at the same time as Guillaume and I, like way back in the day.
Okay.
He had a really big success with poker as well.